The summer I turned 22 was supposed to be just another chapter in my bleak, predetermined life. Working at my father Roy's hardware store for next to nothing, living under his roof because college was deemed impractical, and enduring the constant torment of my golden child brother, Jared. We weren't poor, but we weren't the kind of family that took vacations. So when Roy announced we'd be driving cross-country for my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I should have known something was off. 3 days into the road trip, I had already resigned myself to the usual torment. Roy and Jared took turns making my life hell, while my mother, Linda, muttered half-hearted protests that did nothing to stop them. It was the same dynamic I'd grown up with. Roy ruled with cruelty, Jared followed his lead, and Mom turned a blind eye. That morning, we stopped at a remote rest area in Colorado. Nothing but empty fields, distant mountains, and a rundown restroom. I'd been cramped in the back seat for hours and needed to stretch my legs. I left my phone charging in the car, my wallet tucked into my duffel bag. It was supposed to be a quick break. 10 minutes. That's how long I was in that bathroom. When I walked out into the sun, the parking spot where our SUV had been was empty. At first, I thought it was a joke, their usual brand of cruelty. I walked around, searching the lot. Nothing. The sinking feeling in my gut told me this wasn't a prank. I waited an hour, then another, sitting on the curb, watching strangers come and go. A trucker asked if I was okay. I lied and said my girlfriend was inside. I told myself they'd come back, that they wouldn't just leave me in the middle of nowhere. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't an accident. This was a test, a sick game to see if I could survive. Jared was probably laughing about it, betting on how long it would take me to crack. Roy was proving a point, that I was disposable. And Mom, well, she'd stay quiet, just like always. I could have called them, begged for a ride, but something in me snapped. A lifetime of humiliation, of being treated like an afterthought flooded my mind. I imagined Jared's voice mocking me, my father dismissing my existence. Instead of calling them, I called a local shelter in Grand Junction, 40 miles away. Then I approached a kind-looking woman and asked if she could give me a ride to town, feeding her a small lie about a family emergency. She hesitated but agreed. That first night at the shelter, I faced a grim reality. I had nothing. No ID, no money, no way to prove who I was. But for the first time, I also had something I'd never had before: freedom. The shelter's manager, Mike, let me use their computer. I found my uncle's wedding address but hesitated. Why should I chase after a family that had discarded me? Instead, I searched for jobs that paid in cash. I created a new email, looked up how to replace lost IDs, and started forming a plan. 2 days later, I was washing dishes at a small diner called Sonny's. The owner, Dottie, was an older woman with purple-streaked gray hair and more tattoos than I could count. When I walked in, desperate for work, she looked me up and down and said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me. You're dead. Start now." And that was that. I worked double shifts, slept at the shelter, and slowly started piecing my life together. Within a week, I had a cheap burner phone. I set up a P.O. box and contacted Vital Records to get a new ID. Then, 7 days after they abandoned me, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was my mother, voice shaking. She demanded to know where I was. They had been looking everywhere. It was just a joke, she insisted. They had waited for 20 minutes and came back, but I had disappeared. I listened to her false panic, my father grumbling in the background, Jared laughing like this was some prank gone too far. "Nico, say something. We've been worried sick." I let the silence stretch before replying, my voice calm, steady. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own, so watch me." I hung up, blocked the number, then blocked every family contact I could remember. The next day, I went to a Verizon store and changed my number completely. Before I did, though, I checked my voicemail. 27 missed calls. I imagined their panic morphing into anger, their disbelief that I wasn't groveling to come back. And for the first time in my life, I smiled. The reality of my abandonment hit me in waves, each stronger and colder than the last. At first, I sat on the curb of that desolate rest stop, convincing myself it was just a cruel joke, that any moment now my father's dark green Suburban would pull up, and they'd all be laughing at my expense. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the truth settled like a stone in my gut. They weren't coming back. Panic wanted to set in, but anger held it at bay. This wasn't just some prank gone too far. It was a test, a punishment, a final act of cruelty from a family that had spent years chiseling away at me. If I called them, if I begged, they'd win. They'd get to see me broken, desperate, and helpless. Not this time. I walked to the highway's edge, watching the occasional car blur past, considering my options. With no phone, no wallet, and nothing but the clothes on my back, I was as stranded as a person could be. My first instinct was to approach someone, ask for a phone, and call the one person I thought might still care, Uncle Rick. But something stopped me. I had been discarded, tossed aside like trash. If they didn't want me, then I didn't need them either. Instead, I approached a woman who had pulled over with her 2 young kids. She eyed me warily as I explained that my family had to leave unexpectedly, and that I just needed a ride into Grand Junction. Whether it was my non-threatening appearance or the sincerity in my voice, she agreed. It was the first small victory of what would become my new life. By nightfall, I found myself at a homeless shelter, a place I never imagined I'd be. It was a harsh wake-up call, but it also provided something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. I was nobody to these people. I wasn't Roy's disappointment, Jared's punching bag, or Linda's ignored burden. I was just another lost soul trying to get by. And for the first time in my life, that meant I could become whoever I wanted to be. The next morning, I used the shelter's computer to look up ways to get a new ID, to find work, to start over. I knew one thing: I wasn't going to chase after the people who had left me behind. Instead, I was going to prove to myself that I didn't need them. 2 days later, I was washing dishes at Sonny's, a small diner run by a tough-as-nails woman named Dottie. She didn't ask too many questions. She just handed me a dish towel and said, "Don't steal from me, and we'll get along fine." That was good enough for me. Within a week, I had a routine: work at Sonny's, sleep at the shelter, save every dollar I made. It was hard, exhausting, and humiliating at times, but it was mine. No one could take it from me. Then, on the 7th day, my burner phone rang with an unknown number. My mother's voice filled the receiver, frantic and shaking. "Where are you? We've been looking everywhere." A lifetime of pain and memories collided with that single moment. Every insult, every cruel joke, every time they dismissed me as less than nothing. And now they wanted to know where I was? Now they were suddenly concerned? I let her ramble, listened to the fake worry, heard my father's gruff voice in the background saying I needed to stop being dramatic. And then, when she finally paused for a breath, I simply said, "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own, so watch me." Then I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. For weeks, I threw myself into survival mode, determined to build a new life with nothing but my instincts and stubbornness. The first few nights in Grand Junction were a blur of sleeping in the shelter, showering in gas station bathrooms, and eating whatever scraps I could find. The staff at the shelter were used to seeing people like me. Runaways, the abandoned, those with nowhere else to go. But I wasn't just another kid on the streets. I had no intention of staying there. By some stroke of luck, I landed a dishwashing job at Sonny's Diner, a small but busy local joint run by Dottie, a 60-something woman with purple streaked gray hair and a sharp tongue. The first thing she told me after hiring me was, "Steal from me, and I'll bury you out back." I believed her. But for the first time in my life, someone gave me a job without a sneer or a lecture about how I'd probably fail. With my first paycheck, I bought a cheap prepaid phone and started the painful process of replacing my ID. Mike, one of the shelter volunteers, helped me contact vital records in my home state, and within a month, I had a new identification card with my own address, the shelter's address. But still, it was mine. It was a start. Then, 7 days after my family had abandoned me, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Nico, where are you?" It was my mother's voice, quivering, laced with fake concern. I heard my father's gruff voice in the background. "Tell him to stop screwing around and get his ass to Uncle Rick's." Then Jared's laughter. "Dude, we waited for you. You're being so dramatic." The old me might have fallen for it. The old me might have begged to be picked up. But something inside me had changed. Their words didn't sting the way they used to. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own," I said calmly, gripping the phone tighter. "So watch me." And then I hung up. I blocked their numbers. Every single one I remembered. The next day, I changed my phone number completely. Before I did, I saw the final tally. 107 missed calls. I imagined their panic turning to anger, their amusement shifting to frustration when their punching bag simply refused to come home. 1 month later, I had my own tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. It smelled like fabric softener all the time, but it was mine. Dottie promoted me to prep cook, and I spent my days learning how to chop vegetables without losing a finger. Nights were hard. There were times when I scrolled through old emails, staring at family photos I could never be part of again. But every morning, I woke up in a place where no one called me worthless. Every paycheck I earned was mine alone. 3 months after being left at that rest stop, I checked my old email one last time. One new message from my mother. "Your grandmother is asking about you. Please just let us know you're alive." I stared at it for a long time. Then, without responding, I deleted my account for good. That night, Dottie taught me how to make her famous apple pie. She watched me knead the dough and said, "You've got good hands for pastry." It was the first real compliment I could remember getting in years, and for the first time, I believed it. I never looked back. Dinner was chicken enchiladas, nothing fancy, just a recipe from the back of an old El Paso box that I'd tweaked over the years. Sophie set the table without being asked, carefully placing forks on the wrong side until Elise quietly corrected her. Leo insisted on wearing his Spider-Man costume because it was Tuesday, and apparently, Tuesday was now Spider-Man Day. When the doorbell rang, I almost dropped the dish I was carrying to the table. Elise squeezed my arm as she passed and whispered that she had my back no matter what. The kids looked up curiously, sensing something important was happening. Introductions were awkward. Roy kept calling Elise Karen, despite corrections. Linda couldn't stop crying whenever she looked at the kids, which was freaking Leo out. Jared and Mira were the least awful, making actual efforts at normal conversation, though Jared kept dropping hints about family helping family. After dinner, Elise took the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that clearly said, "Text if you need extraction." Then it was just me and them, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too small. Roy started in on the pitch, how family sticks together, How he'd always known I'd make something of myself. Lie. How they just needed a little help to get back on their feet. $20,000. Just a loan, of course. I let him finish. Then I asked him if he remembered what he said to me on my 18th birthday. He looked blank. I reminded him, "At least you can't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem." I asked Mom if she remembered what she did when Roy threw my acceptance letter to community college in the trash. Nothing. She had done nothing. I asked Jared if he remembered telling my first girlfriend that I was probably a faggot anyway, when she came looking for me at the house. They squirmed and made excuses. Roy started to get that dangerous edge to his voice that used to make me shrink. But here's the thing. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I went to my office, came back with an envelope, and handed it to Roy. Inside was a check for $73.50. Roy looked at it, confused, asked what the hell this was supposed to be. I told him, in 2010, that was exactly what a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown would have cost. The exact amount it would have taken for me to make it back home from where they abandoned me. The silence was absolute. Then Roy started shouting, called me ungrateful, selfish, said I'd always been a disappointment, the greatest hits album of my childhood playing one last time. I didn't argue, didn't shout back, just stood up and told them it was time to leave. Mom tried a different approach. Tears, guilt. How could I do this to family? Jared went cold. The mask of friendly brother completely dropped. Mira just looked embarrassed for all of them. When they finally left, Roy crumpled the check and threw it on our front step. I closed the door and leaned against it, legs suddenly shaky. Elise came downstairs, asked if I was okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, checked on the sleeping kids, got ready for bed like it was any other night. As I was setting the security system, I pulled up the front door camera on my phone. They were still in the driveway, arguing, Roy gesturing wildly, Mom crying, Jared looking at our house with an expression I recognized too well, envy mixed with hatred. Finally, they got in their rental car and drove away. I've never seen or heard from them again. Don't expect to. The chapter is closed. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't something you do. It's something you live. Every happy moment with my kids. Every inside joke with Elise. Every quiet Sunday morning with nothing to fear. Every single ordinary day in a life built on my terms. I never made it back home. I did something better. I built one. The years passed, and I built a life far removed from the one I had left behind. The pain of abandonment faded into the background as I focused on my own success. Sonny's East flourished under my management, and I eventually took on a more significant role in its expansion. Elise and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony, attended by the people who truly mattered. We built a life together, one that was filled with love, respect, and stability. Everything my family had denied me. We had 2 children, Sophie and Leo, who became the light of our lives. Our modest home became a sanctuary, a place where laughter replaced cruelty and warmth replaced fear. Elise's parents embraced me as one of their own, and for the first time, I experienced what a real family felt like, one built on mutual care rather than obligation and manipulation. Despite moving forward, a small part of me kept tabs on my old family, not out of longing or regret, but out of a need to remind myself why I had left. Roy's hardware store eventually shut down, unable to compete with the big box retailers. My mother, Linda, took on odd jobs to make ends meet, her social media now a constant stream of nostalgic posts about family values that rang hollow. Jared continued to spiral, bouncing from failed business ventures to broken relationships. Their lives crumbled while mine flourished, and I felt no sympathy, only a sense of justice. Then, one evening, as Elise and I were folding laundry while watching a movie, my phone buzzed with an unexpected notification, a LinkedIn alert. Someone had viewed my profile 27 times in one day. My stomach tightened as I opened the app, already suspecting the culprit. Jared Matthews, my brother. For 15 years, I had heard nothing from them, and now, suddenly, they were looking for me. A cold, familiar anger settled in my chest. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. They weren't reaching out because they had changed or regretted what they had done. They needed something. 3 days later, they showed up at Sunny's East. It was Maya, one of our staff, who informed me that some family was asking for me. My heart pounded as I stepped out front and saw them. Roy looked gaunt, his once imposing frame diminished by time and hardship. Linda's face was etched with lines of worry, her dyed brown hair doing little to mask the exhaustion. Jared stood beside them, wearing the same arrogant smirk I remembered from my youth, though now it was tinged with desperation. They greeted me like nothing had happened, as if 15 years of silence hadn't passed between us. I gestured to an empty table, signaling for Maya to bring water. Then I sat across from them, arms crossed, and waited. They had found me through a magazine feature, a small article in Rocky Mountain Rising highlighting local entrepreneurs. A friend of my mother's had recognized me and sent it to her. From there, the search began. 107 missed calls to my old number, messages pleading for a response. And when those went unanswered, they did what they always did, showed up expecting to be welcomed back. At first, they pretended it was about reconnecting, about making things right. But I pressed them. I asked the one question that truly mattered. Why now? The truth came in broken pieces. Roy's heart problems had led to mounting medical debt. Their house was gone, foreclosed. Jared had lost everything in a failed cryptocurrency scheme and was back living with them. My mother needed surgery but couldn't afford it. They weren't here for reconciliation. They were here for money. I should have been furious, should have thrown them out. But instead, all I felt was pity. These people, who had once controlled my every moment, who had abandoned me without a second thought, were nothing now. Just broken figures grasping at straws. I invited them to dinner, said I needed time to think. It wasn't kindness, it was strategy. That night, I set the table with Sophie and Leo helping, their innocent laughter filling the air. Elise whispered that she was proud of me, no matter what happened. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and let them in. Dinner was polite but tense. Roy misnamed Elise several times. Linda kept crying, and Jared attempted to play the role of long-lost brother. But I knew what was coming, and sure enough, after dessert, Roy laid it all out. $20,000. That's what they needed. Just a loan, of course. Family helps family. I let them finish. Then I got up, walked to my office, and returned with an envelope. Inside was a check for $73.50. Roy's brows furrowed. What the hell is this? The cost of a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown in 2010, I said, my voice calm. The exact amount I would have needed to get back home after you left me stranded. Silence. Then the explosion. Roy called me ungrateful, selfish, said I'd always been a disappointment. Linda sobbed, asking how I could do this to my own family. Jared, mask slipping completely, sneered, "We should have left you there for good." I stood up. "You did." I opened the front door. "Get out." They left in a rage, Roy crumpling the check and throwing it onto the porch. As their car disappeared down the street, I locked the door and exhaled a shaky breath. Elise came to my side. "You okay?" I nodded. We cleaned up the dishes in silence, tucked our kids into bed, and settled in for the night. Before turning in, I checked the security camera. They were still outside, arguing in the driveway. Roy gesturing wildly, Linda crying, Jared glaring at my house with something dark in his expression. Envy, resentment, hatred. Then they were gone. And I knew, in that moment, I had truly won. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't about destruction. It's about success. It's about thriving while they collapse under the weight of their own failures. It's about building a home, a life, a happiness that they can never touch. They abandoned me at a rest stop, expecting me to crawl back. Instead, I built something they could never take away, and that was all the justice I needed. 15 years later, the past came knocking. It started with a LinkedIn notification. Someone had viewed my profile 27 times in a single day. At first, I assumed it was a recruiter, but when I checked the name, my stomach dropped. Jared Matthews, my brother. For years, I had kept tabs on my family through fake accounts, but their lives had become background noise. I knew Roy and Linda had lost their house and moved into a smaller rental. Jared had bounced from job to job, and his latest attempt at running a business had gone up in flames. They weren't doing well, but I didn't care. Until now. 3 days later, I was at Sunny's East, overseeing a shipment, when Maya, one of my servers, called me to the front. "Some family is asking for you," she said hesitantly. My heart slammed against my ribs. I thought it might be Elise's parents stopping by, but as soon as I stepped into the dining area, I saw them. Roy, thinner and older, his presence no longer intimidating. Linda, with dyed brown hair, her eyes darting around nervously. Jared, standing just like our father once did, arms crossed, radiating entitlement. Beside him stood a younger woman, probably his latest wife. No one spoke. Roy was the first to break the silence. "Nico?" His voice carried hesitation, something I'd never heard from him before. I gestured to an empty corner booth. Maya brought waters. I sat across from them, waiting. They had found me through an old magazine article about successful small business owners in Colorado. A friend of my mother's had spotted it and sent it to her. My parents had called my old number 107 times over the years, according to Linda. I let them talk, weaving their story, rewriting history in a way that painted them as the victims. They weren't here for a heartfelt reunion. They were here because they needed something. The truth came out in pieces. Roy had severe medical bills. Linda needed knee surgery. Jared's crypto venture had failed, leaving him in debt. The house they had moved into was now being foreclosed on. They needed $20,000. Just a loan, Roy assured me. I should have been furious. I should have thrown them out of my restaurant. But looking at them, all I felt was pity. These were the people who once controlled my entire world, who could destroy my sense of self with a single cruel comment. Now they were just desperate, broken. I told them I needed to talk to Elise and invited them to dinner at my house that night. They left, hopeful. When I got home, I told Elise everything. She offered to take the kids to her sister's for the evening, but I refused. I wanted my family, my real family, to be there. We had a simple dinner, chicken enchiladas, something I had perfected over the years. Sophie set the table while Leo ran around in his Spider-Man costume. When the doorbell rang, my hands shook slightly as I opened the door. Introductions were awkward. Roy kept calling Elise Karen, despite corrections. Linda couldn't stop crying, and it unnerved Leo. Jared was all fake charm, dropping hints about family helping family. Mira, his wife, stayed quiet. After dinner, Elise took the kids upstairs, leaving me alone with them. Roy wasted no time. "We just need a little help to get back on our feet," he said. 20,000. That's nothing for someone like you now." I didn't react. Instead, I asked Roy if he remembered what he told me on my 18th birthday. He looked confused. I reminded him, "At least you can't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem." I turned to Linda and asked if she recalled the time Roy threw my college acceptance letter in the trash, and she said nothing. I looked at Jared and asked if he remembered calling my first girlfriend and telling her I was probably a faggot. The room was silent. I stood and went to my office, returning with an envelope. I handed it to Roy. Inside was a check for $73.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown in 2010. "That's what it would have cost me to come home," I said. Roy's face turned red. "What the hell is this supposed to be?" he snapped. I shrugged. "The price of a ticket back to where you left me. That's what I'm offering." The explosion came quickly. Roy accused me of being selfish, ungrateful. Jared called me a bitter asshole. Linda sobbed, trying to guilt me. Mira sat in uncomfortable silence, clearly regretting coming. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight back. When it was clear they weren't getting what they wanted, I stood and opened the front door. "It's time to go," I said calmly. Roy crushed the check in his fist and threw it at my feet. "You're a disgrace," he hissed. "You always have been." Jared glared at me as he walked out, but I saw the truth in his eyes. Jealousy. Because I had built something. Because I had won. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, letting out a slow breath. Elise came downstairs, asking if I was okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We cleaned up in silence. Later that night, I checked the security cameras. They were still in the driveway, arguing. Roy gestured wildly, Linda crying, Jared staring at my house with an expression that was a mix of anger and longing. Eventually, they drove away. I knew I'd never see them again. That was the thing about revenge. The best kind wasn't about destruction. It was about building something better, something they could never touch. I hadn't just survived their cruelty. I had thrived, and that was more satisfying than any grudge I could hold. I closed the door behind them, my hands still steady, my breath even. Outside, I could hear the engine of their rental car idling, then the murmur of voices, heated, desperate, and finally the slam of doors. The tires crunched against the gravel as they pulled away, disappearing into the night. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. Elise appeared at the top of the stairs, watching me with quiet concern. "It's done?" she asked. I nodded. "It's done." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around my waist, pressing her forehead against my shoulder. "I'm proud of you." And I believed her. I believed her in a way I had never believed anyone in my family, because her words didn't come with conditions or expectations. We moved through the rest of the night in silence, brushing teeth, turning off lights, checking on the kids. Sophie curled up with her favorite stuffed animal. Leo sprawled across his bed like a starfish. I stood in their doorway for a long moment, watching them sleep, their small, peaceful breaths filling the room. My children. My family. Elise came up beside me, her fingers brushing against mine. "You okay?" she asked again, softer this time. I let out a slow breath, one I hadn't realized I was holding. "Yeah." And for the first time in 15 years, I meant it. As we lay in bed that night, Elise traced absent-minded circles on my arm. "Do you think they'll try again?" she asked. I thought about the look in Jared's eyes, the resentment, the disbelief that I had truly shut the door on them. I thought about Roy's anger, Linda's desperation. Maybe, I admitted, but it won't matter. Because they had already lost. They had lost me the moment they left me behind, the moment they chose to break me instead of love me. And I had won. Not through revenge, not through hate, but by building something better. By proving in every breath, in every small moment of happiness, that I didn't need them. I had spent years wondering if I would ever hear from them again, if they would ever feel remorse, if I would ever get an apology that actually meant something. But now, as I lay in my warm bed, with the woman I loved beside me, and the life I had built around me, I realized something important. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need anything from them at all. The next morning, as the sun rose over the quiet suburban street, I stepped outside to pick up the newspaper. A small white envelope lay on the welcome mat, crumpled and creased. My name was scrawled across the front in Roy's unmistakable handwriting. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked inside, dropped it into the trash, and sat down at the breakfast table with my family. Sophie was already talking about her ballet recital, Leo demanding more syrup for his pancakes. Elise smiled at me over her coffee mug, a quiet understanding passing between us. This was my home, this was my life, and I wasn't looking back.